The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. Today's episode is titled The Hot Mess and the Fray, and we are pleased to be joined by a special guest, Geoff Keefe from Boulder, Colorado, longtime friend and Zen practitioner of Paul's. And we're going to be diving into examples from his career where Zen skills produced positive or negative outcomes and how he used his training to deal with all that. So, Paul, welcome, and tell us about Geoff and how you guys met.
Yeah, you bet. Good to see you, Scott, and welcome, Geoff. Thanks for joining us on the pod. Our first guest. Geoff and I have known each other for over 20 years. We got first acquainted as he came and joined the Zen Center where I was practicing and started to practice. He had already had a long history of practicing with Zen as a resident of the Zen Center of Los Angeles and practicing with a number of teachers. So he kind of came in as a mature Zen practitioner with more years of practice than I did. And we connected very much on that path. And then also he's been an executive and high level professional in a number of industries for the bulk of his career, going back, 30, 40 years. And I really connected with him on that too, because it was rare to find someone who was operating at that level in a professional capacity, and also someone who had such a deep Zen practice. So he's the perfect person to come and talk about our theme here on the podcast, which is the Game of Zen, which is, I was thinking about it, Scott. It's like, the Game of Zen is a little different from the regular games that we all play. We've got professional games and corporate games and economic games, and they all have their rules, but the Game of Zen is a better game. It's a deeper game of mastery that we can apply within all of those other games. So we're kind of outlining the rules, if you will, around the Game of Zen that really helps us with all those other games. So Geoff, you share a little bit more for our listeners about your path in Zen and professionally.
Well, thank you. And I'm honored to be with you both today. And so thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. And the questions that you've posed, I have to be honest and tell you, have been provocative. They've really stimulated me to look kind of a little bit deeper and kind of behind the stories that I tell as part of my history. As Paul mentioned, I was first exposed to Zen, as a lot of us were, probably in the 60s, from reading Alan Watts and other influences like that. But my first in-person experience with meditation was with a yoga group in 1972 in Bellingham, Washington. And then 3 years later, I visited the Zen Center of Los Angeles in 75 for an introduction. And so that was really my first face-to-face in-person exposure to formal Zen practice. And I won't go through all of the left turns and right turns and cul-de-sacs and blind alleys and whatnot, but there have been quite a few. But I've moved through various practice centers over the years and have found a home here. And Paul and I share. I'm part of Paul's meditation group, Zen Center, Eon Zen Center here in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm quite happy where I am. Professionally, I I ended up being in the business world, albeit it was an avocational path. It was the outdoor industry. I was a climber and backpacking wilderness wanderer, less of the athletics type and probably more of the Philip Whalen and Gary Snyder type. That goes back for me to when I was a kid. I grew up in Washington State, going to the Cascades and then later the Sierra Nevada and whatnot. But I ended up finding work in the outdoor industry. Never had taken a business course, never had any interest in taking a business course. I've still never taken a business course, and I've taught more than a few. So I don't quite know how that happens. But I think I learned, the school of hard knocks, maybe they call it, or in the streets, whatever, just kind of trial and error, making mistakes. And I learned, and I really have to recognize and appreciate through the kindness of mentors, people who promoted me above my skill set and said, "Go figure it out, kid." And each time, one way or another, somehow with their patience, I did, and that was an enormous, enormous gift. So I won't list the whole CV, but I went through a number of outdoor companies, from retail to pure play .com startups, manufacturing companies, wholesale companies. I was a consultant, been president of, I think, 5 or 6 different companies at different times. Spent a whole lot of time in Asia during one of those stints when I was doing sourcing and so forth. So it was a lovely way to spend 40 years, and it went by somewhat quickly. But I love this conversation, and I can get specific with examples. But if you would humor me, I'd love to. I was making notes the other day when I was thinking about this, and there are a few things that I realized were really consistent, that I have to look back and realize, consistent in the way that I operated in organizations. And for me, it was really always about the way we operated as a group of people. I was most interested in the group of people, the team, the harmony, the communication, supporting each other, setting goals, winning, celebrating, all of that, especially celebrating. So, and I'll be quick about this. I don't want to dominate our time today, but there's a few things that just came up over and over again, and some of them come out of the Eightfold Path, or come out of the Zen Buddhist paramitas, or the perfections, and I won't go too far into that at all. But patience is a huge one in organizations. Rights, we refer to right speech, and we could talk about this for a while, but right speech sometimes means that you speak, and it sometimes means that you don't. And the latter can oftentimes be as valuable as the former. Not elevating yourself, but elevating your team. I was once talking to Jerry Shishinwick Roshi, of course, who Paul knows, he's Paul's teacher, and we were talking about the work environment, and I was complaining about something in my job. I forget what it was, but he said that he found his success often by elevating those above him, that was profound. I've never forgotten that, because I always thought about, well, I want to elevate the people, beside me, and I don't like this terminology, but below me, if you will, but elevating everybody else and not being afraid to have somebody else be smarter than I am, which is not hard. Just a couple others here really quickly. Of course, listening. Every time when I had managers or vice presidents or other upper level people reporting to me, it's just been a habit of mine. Every week we sit down, we close the door, one-on-one, and it's not me saying, okay, here's what I want you to do, but rather, how can I help you? How can I help you? A couple of other things. I used to have a little sign on my wall in most of my offices, and it was 10 and then TO1, 10 to 1, reminding myself that for every time that I needed to get on somebody's case and say, you really dropped the ball on this one, make sure that there's 10 times where I said, way to go. Thank you. Awesome. You did great. Two other things, and then I'll move off of this. We can't avoid consequences. It's impossible to avoid consequences. And the last one, it's kind of related. I can't fix or control everything. That's a big one. as a vice president, as a president, as a CEO, whatever it is, that's my job, right? To control everything. And I can't. It's just, I may need to tell people that I'm doing so, or that it's possible, or that I'm really, I'm really trying. But at the end of the day, there's a lot that's completely out of my control. And there are going to be consequences of that, and I can't avoid those. So those are just a few kind of principles that have, that have overarched. And I can think of every one of the companies I worked for, whether it was Patagonia or Low Alpine Systems or Mountain Smith or whatever else it might have been. I used every one of those things in each place. Maybe I should pause there, and there's a question reframe.
Good stuff, Geoff. So I'm curious about, first of all, I like how you say you're elevating people around you. I think above, below, and beside you. I think that's super important in every successful organization, that people are rooting for each other, and it goes back to teamwork, and not everybody does it the right way. I'm curious, as your career, evolved into different spots, and you also were learning the Zen practices and the Eightfold Path, how did you work those in, and how did that improve situations that you were dealing with, maybe good or bad ones?
Yeah, great question. And I have to say that if I did that, and I think I probably did, but if I did that, it wasn't deliberate or conscious or programmatic. It was, and it's probably just, my nature. It was probably more instinctual or intuitive or, ad hoc, I guess you might say. But lots and lots of examples. There was a time where I was senior vice president of and I won't name companies here, so it's not necessary to do that, but of a somewhat smaller company, about a $20 million company that had retail and wholesale and manufacturing and outdoor school and things like that. And I was a big fish in a little pond, and humility really had to come into play. And I will name this one. I got hired at Patagonia, which was a company that was easily at the time probably 30 times bigger. And I was nobody. I was right in the middle, and I still thought, I was pretty hot, and it just didn't last that long. And I have to say, looking back, I don't think I thought of it at the time, but practice had to come into that, because I just needed to do what I was there for and play my role, and suck it up.
Geoff, I think having known you in those days, just your choice of being in the outdoor industry, I think, was informed by a sense of right livelihood for you. Right? It was an industry that came in that possesses a cultural value set, which you're very much aligned with. And I know that you've wrestled over the years with the ways that those haven't always been in alignment. If a private equity firm comes in and takes over one of those companies, they perhaps don't honor the original, values of the company. But would you say? I mean, maybe you can say something about that.
Yeah,
that was kind of right. Some sense of right livelihood has always been present for you.
Well, I did have a story that I told myself, that because this had to do when we weren't making napalm and we weren't selling cigarettes, and it was more than simply neutral in terms of impact on people and society. It was actually positive. It was healthy. Let's get outdoors. And so, it was physically healthy, mentally healthy, and it was not lost on me, because this is why I got into it. There was a spiritual component to this. When you're alone in the wilderness for a week, things happen. Things change. Your perspective shifts. And I thought that was revolutionary. And so I was very much in that kind of camp. Not everybody necessarily was. There really was an athletic aspect of it. And as Americans and even Europeans, anything that's worth doing that's simply joyful or healthy or spiritual, by golly, we're going to turn it into a competition. So, climbing competitions came along. They weren't around when I got started, and all of that. I mean, we turned everything into a competition. But there were more than a few people who were kind of in that right life. Maybe I guess you'd call it right livelihood. As we looked closer at it, and this is the case, I think, with anything that we do. It's easy to find the things where we might be hypocritical. I was in the business of encouraging people to buy stuff that honestly they may not necessarily have needed, and that they had that thing already, but hey, we have a new one for you, and you need this one. And I could really bring up some judgments around that as relates to right livelihood. We were consuming aluminum that probably we had to overthrow a government in South America in order to get. Somebody did. And everything was made of nylon. And, I don't know, I have never seen a nylon tree. so there was all that. But Paul, you referred to something else. Things did change after a while. There was really a spirit. It was somewhat tribal. And all of the early companies were owned by founders who were not business people, for the most part. They were outdoor people, and they weren't there because it was business. They were there because they loved it. And you've seen the cartoon of the door to the store is closed and the sign says "Gone fishing." Well, that was perfectly acceptable. Gone climbing. See you Monday. Have a nice weekend. And that was really the nature of it. That shifted in the 80s. And we got the attention of the advertisers, the marketers, Wall Street, investment capital, and, a whole new group of people. I don't want to judge anybody. Everybody had a job to do, but a whole new group of people got involved in these companies, and in many cases bought them, aggregated them, and a lot was lost. And there's a story there, but but it changed. There's in business we know about these market arcs, and we experienced that, and of course in life things don't stay the same very long. So
and I'm curious also about, how do you let go from things that aren't going well, either with colleagues or with the businesses themselves? We all have attachment to things, especially when we're in a business situation and we're entrepreneurs. But, I know over the course of your career, there's been ups and downs and right turns and left turns, as you said. How do you let go from things and move on to something else?
Kind of like that. But it's a really good question, Scott, because it, as you said, it happened over and over again, especially, from the middle 80s probably on. And I was involved in different companies that were acquired. I was involved in 3 companies that went bankrupt. And especially with the acquisitions. Now, I want to say this as gently as I can, but because I've been on the other side too. I've been part of management teams that were on the acquiring side, and I have to be really humble because I did the things as the acquirer that I objected to when being acquired, and there's an arrogance there. Well, we purchased you because you guys weren't doing so well on your own. So obviously we have the right answers and you don't. Mm-hmm. And there's a bit of that. And I fell prey to that too. I came in, with the head, with the head of steam more than a few times. And I'm not proud of myself of how quickly I moved and how the decisions I made, kind of just moving fast, because there's somebody with money behind me, and that's what they expected. And I didn't like it when it was done to me.
Yeah.
At all. There's a level of patience when you're on the acquired side of things. Just a really quick anecdote. And again, I won't name companies, but a company I was a VP in and was in charge of global sourcing. We had about 70 factories in Asia. We were acquired by a large private equity firm, and they brought in all their guys from an industry that had nothing to do with the outdoor industry whatsoever. And my CEO, and I was on good terms with him, and he came to me and said, I've brought in this guy who you're going to report to now instead of to me, who's really good at the whole sourcing thing. Supply chain. He's a supply chain professional. And you're going to learn a lot from him. And again, I really had to suck it up and be patient as I watched this fellow nearly bankrupt the company.
Wow.
And ethically, it just brings up all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I tried as best I could to try to save us and him. He ended up getting fired. I ended up getting the whole job back again. But I had to watch myself, because there's that competitive, nasty guy in there who wants to go,
yeah,
I'm just going to sit back and watch you fall on your face. And I really tried to avoid that, but I had to look myself in the mirror and say, there you are. And so that's eye-opening. I don't, every day there was practice opportunities in some of those settings.
Yeah. So great story, Paul. How in this situation and others have you watched Geoff apply the Eightfold Path to these situations?
Mm-hmm. Well, he just pointed to one right there, which is to not know, to lean into the not knowing, right? To not make himself out to be the expert or the person who knows. And that's there's a right mindfulness component to that. That's one of the Eightfold steps. And then I'm sure there was right speech and right action, associated with that as well. I think I knew you, Geoff, when you were going through that episode with the fellow who was brought in, over the supply chain, and you were going to China, every 3 months. I think you were going over there to manage these things, and things were really out of alignment. And I think at the beginning, you were very angry, and I think you really wrestled with being very conflictual with the fellow. So the process that you just described, and this is answering your question, Scott, was a process. It took a while, I would say, for you to recognize your own reactive kind of responses to the situation, and it probably wasn't quite as helpful at the beginning. It might have taken you a few months, if not a little bit longer, for you to more get in alignment with allowing him to do his thing and actually trying to make the best of the situation. Yeah. So it is definitely a process. Yeah.
I would completely agree with that. Yeah.
I think to kind of to give a snapshot maybe of how, I've seen Geoff work with it, and I think we all kind of have to work with it, is so I don't know, most of us have heard this term VUCA, right? To apply to a business context. It refers to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Right. So there's a lot of like executive coaching out there about how you deal with VUCA. Right. Now, we also have inner VUCA, right? The inner volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's what the Eightfold Path is. It's helping us get right with that inner volatility so that we can meet external volatility in the right way, which means the wholesome way, which means the aligned way, right? It doesn't change, the fundamental chaotic nature of business environment, if you will, really of the world, ultimately, right? That's the fray. We're all in the fray all the time. Okay. the inner volatility, that's the hot mess. We're all hot messes with all of our reactive systems and our attachments and our desires that aren't met and our cravings and all of that stuff. So when the inner VUCA meets the outer VUCA, now we're in a mess. The hot mess amplifies the fray, and the fray amplifies the hot mess, and it really gets really difficult to deepen in our own presence, to live wholeheartedly. And it also doesn't produce wholesome outcomes in the external world, right? So the Eightfold Path is just a way of almost applying some discipline to the inner VUCA so we can meet the outer VUCA, as it is.
Wonderful. That's really well said. And I've never said these words before, but it just occurs to me that, on my list of things that, that I take away from that time, I can say two things that sound completely contradictory. And Paul, we one of these we say all the time. It's not personal. It's not about me. And for me to be effective in these roles, I had to be able to hold that and say, it's not about me. It's not personal. If this guy is acting out in that particular way, that's really his thing. But the other one, and I don't want to, again, this sounds totally contradictory. At the same time, it's only personal and it's all about me. It's all about me. Not that they're doing this to me, but that how I react and how I comport myself is my responsibility and my growth. That's my practice, and it's all about me. It's nothing else but me. So,
and that's a process, isn't it, Geoff, to kind of be able to be wholehearted in both of those dimensions at the same time.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about ego, Geoff, because we know that in business, there's a lot of egos involved, and it sounds like you've had to deal with quite a few in your career. How do you deal with your own ego in those situations where you said, technically you could have stepped up and said, I'm going to get angry about this. I don't like what's going on. But you want to, you step back and you were looking at the other person and understanding what they were going through, and then figuring out a way to deal with it properly. How did that process evolve?
Boy, that's quite a question. And my own ego was always the biggest issue. It's, I wish I had a good answer to that question. And I would want to say too that getting angry isn't necessarily an expression of ego. It might be the thing that needs to be done. And I don't think that comporting myself in a professional environment like that, or less than professional as it may be, needed to mean that I just rolled with the punches all the time. And I certainly didn't. There were times when what was called for, and this felt like it came out of practice too. Like, am I gonna have the chutzpah to stand up and say what needs to be said here, even though it may not be popular? It was one of my, and I don't want to get off track here, Scott, but it was one of my very, very first lessons. I was younger, so this was 1978. So I was 25 years old, and I was a vice president of an outdoor company, and a colleague and I discovered internal embezzlement. I'll just leave it at that. And it was between partners, and one of the partners put the two of us on the board of directors, thinking that we would be his swing votes when it hit the fan. Mm-hmm. And we weren't. Mm-hmm. In fact, we were funneling evidence to the other parties. And boy, if that wasn't a wake-up call for a 25-year-old kid, to go, sitting in a boardroom, on the 25th floor of a bank in a town I won't name, with lawyers and stuff, and people putting the squeeze on us saying, you don't want to do that, kid. And we did it anyway. and it was the right thing to do, and it blew up the company and it broke up the partnership, and somehow miraculously, all these years later, we're all still friends. I don't know how that happened, but and I don't know if that was ego or not. I don't think it was. I think that was just having the courage to do what needed to be done.
I would guess that the reason you're all friends is because of the way you approach those situations, with compassion, with mindfulness. I think if you had done it differently, it might not have worked out the same way.
Hard to know. I'd have to go back and think about that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the passage of time,
Yeah.
and senility.
So, Paul, when you, as a teacher, when you work with a new student, how do you figure out like what they're going through and what parts of these lessons that you should apply?
Well, I don't figure anything out, Scott.
You did with me.
I just observe them. I just listen to them, and I feel and hear what's showing up for them. And what I'm listening into intuitively is what they're holding on to, right? And to answer a little bit, your previous question to Geoff, one thing that you see, and I've seen, and you see when you study yourself, deeply, is that the ego works in certain ways. It certainly works through holding very firmly onto its opinions, right? It really loves to maintain that. So the one thing of working with the ego is to look at how firmly you're holding on to your own opinions and to really let go. I like it. Strong opinions loosely held. I like that expression. For some reason, my wife doesn't like that expression, but I think it's really important, especially in a business context, to definitely have the strength of your opinion, but to hold it loosely. And if you notice yourself holding on strongly to your opinion, and you might notice how quick you are to criticize or to reject or to come up with a counter argument to other people's opinions, those are signs that the ego is really holding court, most strongly. The other thing the ego likes to do is complexify matters, right? There's something in service to the ego to make things more complicated than they are. It perhaps burnishes its own sense of importance. Well, this situation is so complex, somebody's got to make sense of it. Okay, so that's what I notice, and that's what I hear when students are presenting to me. And this could be in a business context too. I mean, I actually do this as an executive coach too, is I can hear where they're showing up with strong beliefs and where they're showing up with overcomplicating a situation is usually a sign that there's something that they're avoiding, which is perhaps a difficult path for them to follow, or a one that doesn't involve them being the superstar of, or the star of. So I don't know if that answered your question, Scott.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I want to come back to us, that we're all a hot mess, Geoff. So how do you deal with your own hot messness and stay above the fray and then recognize that in others?
Another good question. And I my first instinct is to say that I'm not sure I want to stay above the fray. I think I want to get right in it. I want to get right in it. And, but try to bring peace, and I don't want to use a capital P, but, bring calm into that fray. How do I deal with my hot mess? That's Zen practice.
Yeah.
That's Zen practice. So, and we all know this, there's no answer. There's no solution to it. It's never over. So, how do I deal with my hot mess? Moment by moment.
Yeah.
And, and I get it right sometimes, and I get it horribly wrong sometimes. And then I get up and do it again.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it goes back to impermanence, and every day is a new day. And some days we're going to feel better about ourselves than we do. and also with other people. So sometimes, other people can be really annoying, and sometimes we could have a lot of patience. And I think that's also a challenge in business, is really when you start to deal with more, and as you got into bigger and bigger companies, there was more egos and more personalities that you had to deal with on a daily basis.
And I, and again, without trying to sound trite or cute about this, if I don't love my hot mess, and if I don't love the Fray, then I've separated myself from my life, because there they are. It's what's going on. So it's an intimate gift, this hot mess and this Fray.
Yeah. One more thing, Geoff, about the outdoors business and the connection. You mentioned it a bit earlier about like the peace and tranquility of the outdoors world that you were involved with, and how that plays into the Zen practice. I find when I'm in the outdoors, it's just every time it's spiritual and enjoying. And did you see like a lot of connection there?
I did. I did when I was younger, for sure. And but I think, and again, this is just another opinion, so I'm going to chalk it up and to that. But I've also, over the years, developed a bit of a resistance to the notion of us saying that one thing is more Zen than another thing. So, if we talk about, and of course we know what we're saying when we say that, being alone in the wilderness, let's say, which really is a profound experience, is really a Zen thing. Well, yes, it is. But my practice is to find that when I'm at the RTD station in downtown Boulder, or in the middle of an argument with my spouse, or, when I've got, a stomach bug or something, if I'm making distinctions there, then I'm missing something. So
yeah, that's great. Very good. Awesome. Well, we could go on a lot longer, Geoff, but in the interest of time, I'd love to hear more about your Zen Peacemakers project. Please tell us about that and how people can get in touch with you.
Let's start with the latter. Folks can go to our website, zenpeacemakers.org. Actually, I think we're zenpeacemakersinternational.org. And my email is geoff@zenpeacemakers.org. And Zen Peacemakers is, roughly 30 years old. We're coming up on 30 years, and was founded by the first successor of Hakuyu Taizan Maizumi Roshi, who founded the Zen Center of Los Angeles. Bernie Glassman founded Zen Peacemakers. His profound experience of oneness, of connection, interconnectedness with everything and everybody, led him to really ask the question, after we sit here on this cushion for X amount of time, now what? And his answer was, we need to stand up and go do something. We need to stand up and go do something to relieve suffering. So he, early on, articulated what we refer to as the three tenets. And they are, and Paul referred to one of these already, not knowing. So this really is the mind of Zazen, of, having no preconceptions, no judgments, no ideas about what's happening. Bearing witness, which is looking at the way the world is, whether it's beautiful or ugly, horrible or ecstatic, and not turning away. And then taking loving action is the third one. And I want to try to give you a succinct answer here, so I won't go into. I could, usually I'll present about this for an hour or two, but this has expressed itself in bearing witness retreats in Rwanda and Bosnia, Auschwitz. We're coming up on our 27th year of being at Auschwitz-Birkenau. In Alabama, bearing witness to racism in America. in the Black Hills of South Dakota, bearing witness to the genocide of Native American people, and other places, and street retreats in various cities around the world. We're an organization, nonprofit organization, of roughly 6,000 members in 20 plus countries, with 54 affiliate groups around the world doing this kind of work, working with prisoners, working with refugees, homeless, food insecure people, end of life, pure Dharma teaching sometimes, the arts, women's liberation, racism, all kinds of issues where we are being unkind to one another and harming one another. So we come together to do that kind of work. The last thing I want to say about this, and maybe you may have questions, but the thing that's really unique that makes Zen Peacemakers stand out in the field of engaged Buddhist organizations, and there are a number, Buddhist Peace Fellowship and the Thich Nhat Hanh organization and a number of others, is that we're not trying to change the world. We're not focusing on solutions. We're doing work, but we are decidedly, and this is where it gets a little tricky, we are decidedly not positional. And that's a big one. I'll just give you a really quick example and then I'll turn it back to you. A few years ago, a group came to us and wanted to sign on to a letter opposing the Myanmar military and what they were doing to the Rohingya in Myanmar, and we wouldn't do it. We wanted to hold the Rohingya, but also the Myanmar military. And that's a hard thing, especially political activists like I've been most of my life. And I come from a very positional, good guys, bad guys background. It's a very hard thing to hold that, to take action, even to work, perhaps to oppose something that's going on, but without dividing, without separating. So that's I'll leave you with that. That's one really unique thing about Zen Peacemakers.
Yeah, very interesting. And you mentioned like not picking sides, and I was thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh and why he was exiled from Vietnam for 40 years because he refused to take a side, and neither side, they both wanted him, and he just said, I'm for peace, and they didn't like it, so they kicked him out. So. I think it's fascinating, Geoff, how, first of all, ZenPeacemakersinternational.org is the address.
Yes.
So check it out. And one final question for you, Paul, is watching all this evolution of Geoff throughout his career in Zen and business, what have you witnessed in him that's made you happy that he's further along now?
Well, it's just the the integration. Yeah, those whiskers. It's all about the whiskers. Geoff is stroking his gray chin. It's all about the integration, the integrating these kind of understandings and learnings and capacity, the ability to listen deeply, the patience that Geoff started off with at the beginning. These things just take time for us to learn. So that as with myself, that's the progress that is most rewarding and encouraging, to know that we actually can change in this way, just to deepen. And things that, once we didn't do at all, and then maybe after a few years of practice, we could do for, half an hour, and now become more and more just a fully internalized way of being with the world. So we can meet all situations, big or small, charged or uncharged, young and old people, with the same sense of kind of curiosity and open heart and equanimity. So I've seen that with Geoff, definitely.
That's fantastic. Cool. Well, Geoff, every episode we have a book recommendation, and I would love for you to throw one out for us today.
Well, thanks, Scott, and I like books. But one of in the Zen realm, one of the books that and I think we've probably all read it, that I've read recently. And in fact, we had We had a book group on it. We might even have done a class on it too. I don't recall. It's called The World Could Be Otherwise by the Zen teacher Norman Fisher. And without going into any detail about this, it is not loosely, but very deliberately structured around what we refer to as the six paramitas, or the perfections in Buddhism. And it's a beautiful, Norman, first off, is a beautiful writer, but it's a wonderful piece of Dharma teaching that he takes us through. And I highly recommend it. So there's one for you.
Fantastic. I actually have read that, and Norman Fisher's excellent. So thank you for that. Okay, I think now we're going to go into meditation time for Paul to close us out.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your joining us, Geoff, as a guest here. So the meditation today, it's going to be a little bit non-traditional. So it's a Game of Zen exclusive premiere of this meditation. I'm going to have us really lean into the hot mess and the fray. And Geoff touched on the way that we actually deal. You could look at the two of the three tenets that he mentioned. The peacemaking tenet says the way to work with the hot mess and the fray. So the way I'm describing the hot mess is the internal, volatility and reactivity, and the fray is the external, chaos in quotes of the world, right? So you could say that not knowing is the way of dealing with the internal, and then the bearing witness is going to be the way of dealing with the external. At least that's my frame for these meditations. So to start with, I'll invite everybody in to take a relaxed and comfortable posture. Come off of your seat back if you can. So you're holding yourself up, relax your shoulders, close your eyes, take a deep breath. Turning your attention now to your internal landscape. I'm going to invite you to bring in matters that have a strong emotional charge for yourself in these days of your life. Are there financial concerns? Bring them in consciously. Really go for it. I need to make more money. How am I going to pay that bill? That dentist costs $5,000? Bring it in. Name it. Just notice what you're telling yourself. Your personal health. Are there concerns or worries? Name them. Your family's health. Name your deepest fears in these areas. Your relationship. Your relationship with your partner, your lack of relationship with a partner. Name your fears and opinions, the ones that are charging you most. You can bring in your professional environment. My job's not going the right way. I'm not going to get the promotion. This project is going to fall apart. My boss sucks. Name them. So now just review and cast your mind back over these statements that you've made about your worries and concerns, your activated place. You can ask yourself, is it true? Maybe. Okay, just being with it. Just being with the sources of your internal discord, such as it is, allowing it to be, but looking closely at what's underneath that discord. Okay, next, and turn your attention to the external environment. Whatever's going on in the world or in your life that feels chaotic to you. Turn your attention to it. Look at it directly. We often turn away from disturbing scenes. Wars abroad, poverty, noisiness, conflicts, political chicanery, stupidity, greed. And can we just allow it to be? Just be present in your body right now, letting all of that great wide circus of a world do its thing.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Paul. That was great. And I do want to repeat something about the practice of meditation that I encourage all of our listeners to, that's a great way for us to summarize what happened and also be at one with our own thoughts. So it was great to hear that conversation and then do the meditation. So thank you, Paul. And Geoff, thanks again. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right. So to get in touch with Paul, check out zenatwork.org. Sign up for a free coaching discovery lesson. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd love for you to like and comment and subscribe. We'll see you again soon with a new episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Geoff.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.